welcome to Represents. Today I have the privilege to sit down with Sabine Daniel. Sabine Daniel is an award-winning bilingual Canadian producer and host, creating multi-platform quality production that reflect the world as we know it. Her work consistently produces quality, impactful productions that reflect Canada's cultural and linguistic diversity. Thank you for accepting my invitation and welcome to Represents.
Thank you for inviting me. I know I'm hard to find, but you got me. I wanted to participate.
That's right. No, thank you. I appreciate it. I know how busy you are. So let's get to it. My first question to you is, how did you get your start in the film and television industry, and what motivated you to become a producer or host?
Well, basically, in a nutshell, is that I started really young, believe it or not, in high school here in Ottawa. I started as there was this show on TFO, la télévision franco-ontarienne. They were looking for reporters across the province. They came to audition at Samuel Genet. I was already doing radio, community stuff. I knew I wanted to be in journalism or in television. So they did an audition. They announced it, and I said to my mom, "Hey, my big shot is coming. Can you get my hair done?" I had my hair in braids most of the time. I did synchronized swimming, and I said, "We have to unbraid my hair, get it straight, press it so I could look the part, and come in school and just blow away people." Because I already have this idea of what I wanted to look. Because television is about image and also grabbing people's attention really quick. So by removing my braids, it was a statement, So I did that, got the part, and got to start around, I think I was 15. And every month I had to do a report about how young kids in Ottawa are living. So I would go to Louis Riel, Charlebois school that doesn't exist anymore, and do little reports. And it was my way also to showcase diversity. I knew that, we often saw white people. So I was like, let me show some of my rapper friends, the dancers and everything. So it was, in a way, I was trying to be the new VJ on Music Plus. And that was my goal, to work for Music Plus. And it started really young. And before that, and where I really fell in love with communication, my father wanted to be a journalist. And he would listen to the radio and correct people's French language, or he would make comments on he didn't dress well. He always had a comment. And he would do radio shows at CIBL in Montreal. So he would bring me. So my day consists, like every Saturday, I would go swimming with my father. And I would go to his practice, soccer practice. And after, we would go to the radio show. And for me, it was fun. I was like, hey, he talks about things he loved and with his friends. So I thought it was easy. And my father loved this VJ radio host called Franchi Jarreau. Every morning we would wake up with Franchi Jarreau. My father was like, since Haiti, he loved radio. And Franchi Jarreau was doing a remote on Saint Laurent, the street, a big street in Montreal. And he's like, we're going to go after swimming before my soccer practice, because he's doing a live show. So I was like, oh, we're finally going to see, it's before the internet and everything. So we're finally going to see that Franchi Jarreau. I wanted to see what he was all about, because my father really liked him. And I remember I was 5. I was standing next to my father, and I looked at Franchi Jarreau. I was like, he's just talking. That was regular stuff to me. And I said to my father, I looked at it. My father's very tall. He's 6'5". And I said to my father, c'est super facile. That's what he told me. And yeah. And so Franchi Jarreau heard that I said that. He's like, you think that's that easy? Like after the break, the commercial break, come on, let's talk for 10 minutes. I talked for 10 minutes. I made him laugh. I talked for half an hour. I became kind of his co-host. And after I did it for an hour, and my father was so proud. And I remember like he went back home to my mom and he said, we need to find a special school for me so I could develop. He's like, she's only 5 and she's super comfortable with herself. And Francis Jarreau got me a spot once a month
Wow.
where I got to be like to do commercial or little stuff for kids. Like, and what was fun is that what I like about radio, and I have pictures of that time, is that they didn't know my color and I didn't know it was a barrier. And for my parents who had those barriers coming from Haiti and in Montreal, and my father had all those barriers in his head, he's like, wow, let's put our daughter in a great school. And I went to a performing arts school in starting in grade 3. And that's all because of my parents. And my parents came really young and they saw the potential. They're like, hey, if it's not going to work for us, let's at least make the path for a kid. And that I'm always grateful because, I could say I didn't have the traditional Haitian family. I got it for the discipline, the hard working, the schooling. But when it came to dream big, no limitation. Like I wanted to do synchronized swimming. They're like, what is that? I'm like, it's that. I showed it to them and they're like, okay, we're going to find, and they didn't have the money. Now, when I think of how expensive it was, my mother was like, there was a will, there was a way. We found it, and I did that. So I was always attracted to things that I didn't see a lot of Black people doing. And my parents kind of followed my path. They also saw that I'm very ambitious. If I didn't get my way, I would get one of my aunts to bring me to the auditions, or I found my way, basically. But it's really at 5 years old, I realized it wasn't that difficult. And I remember saying to my mom, if I could go to school, if you could study whatever it takes to do that every day, I want to do that. And they listened.
That's amazing. At least you had the support from family. That's great. I love to hear the stories like that. Your parents really gave you the support you needed to accomplish your dreams. That's amazing.
And I think you need, like, honestly, when you look at anyone that's successful, most of the time you need a support group. If it's not your parent, you have a group of a support system. You can't do it on your own. We're all dependent on someone. Somebody's going to give you a big break. Somebody's going to give you your first job that's going to lead to the other job. So, and I applaud them because they didn't know nothing about the business and they really helped me out.
It's amazing. So you spoke about representation and how your parents didn't have, how do you see in your career, what were the challenges when it comes to diversity and inclusion? I know you do a lot of work in the community when it comes to that. How did you see an improvement over the years, or are we going backwards?
Oh yeah. So let's go backwards. So when I started, there was not a lot of people in French television being in front of the lens. The only representation that I had was my godmother. My godmother is actually a journalist that was on TQS. And when I saw her, I was like, oh, ma marraine est là, my godmother is there. And I thought it was possible. So I was lucky enough to have her in my family. And she was like, go study in journalism and communication. And communication was a new thing that started in the mid 80s. It's still young, still very young. So for me, seeing my godmother was like, okay, I could achieve this. It's doable. So I didn't have the barrier of thinking all Black women can't do it, dark-skinned women. I didn't have the colorism in my head. It came later on when I went. That was the biggest barrier. So I studied in public relations and journalism at La Cité Collégiale. After that, I got a huge break. I knew around the end of my studies at La Cité that I was going to go do journalism in Russia. So at 19 years old, I left Ottawa. That was my first job. I did journalism for 6 months in Russia. I didn't know Niet. I knew Niet and Paka. Niet. That was it. And I left for Russia. We were 16 Canadians picked across Canada to work on a pilot
It's
program
amazing.
from Canada World Youth. And I was the only Black person. My parents didn't want me to go. My mother was like, "You are not going." And I'm like, "It may never come
Mhm.
back." I convinced them. And also, I knew for some reason I had the gut feeling that it was going to change my
And did it?
life. And it when people asked me what was the turning point, it was definitely going to
Mm.
Russia. I landed in host family. So every Canadian had a counterpart who was Russian at home and a counterpart that was Russian at work. It's not the same counterpart. Your counterpart at home is somebody that came from Russia, is not a family member of the host family. So basically, everybody's a stranger. My host family wanted boys and definitely didn't want a Black girl.
Wow. Uh-oh. I want to hear all about it.
So, so my host family's family name is Ignativa, and the family came and we were in a gymnasium and they were naming names. And obviously, I could see like they were kind of scared I'm the only Black person. But before we left, my mother was so scared. She's like, "How are we going to protect my daughter in a country that may not have Black people?" What we didn't know at the time, I went in 97. In 97, they were Russia was, it's funny, Russia is in the news now for other
Yeah.
things, but they were going through the transition of being a communist country to what we have in Canada
Mhm.
right now. And it was very difficult. We came in a weird environment, but when you're young, you don't even see it. You know about it, but you're just living the experience. I could say to me, it was like, hey, I feel like I was in Haiti. Everything that my parents talked about when I was young, I walked to go to school or to work, I did it. I washed my clothes by hand, I did it. Didn't have running water at home, lived it. So it was funny because I was 19, old enough to understand that, hey, I'm living what my parents are living, and also naive enough um, to to be open to what that host family had to instill in me. So I'll put you in context. I was in a host family that was extremely ambitious, didn't know it, and also had a vision for their
Mhm.
family. And I want to explain that because it changed me. So when they came to pick their kids, the kids that were gonna live, they had an idea of making a meat factory. So they needed labor, cheap labor, that's gonna help them out. And Sasha, the son, what was the same age as my sister
Mhm.
Ingrid, was 14, and he saw me. He was intrigued. He's like, "I want her," and I was like, "I don't like that." Like I felt like I was like, somebody in a circus. But it's the way he said it. He's like, "She looks interesting," and he said it in English, and I think we could learn from
Mm.
her. And he said it in English, in his broken English. Sasha's gonna listen to this because I talk about him a lot. And his father obeyed, and I liked it. And they didn't like how the conversation started. And after the father stand firm, he's like, "Yeah, I'll take the girls," when he wanted
Hmm.
boys. So because they wanted me, they had to have Svetlana with me, who was my counterpart at home. And I got into this house where there was a united front, and it was a family that built their house. It took 7 years to build their house. So before stepping in the house, the host father explained to me that's a vision. It's going to become a farm, and this is going to be a meat factory, and this is a family that works hard. Every day we work hard. And first thing he told me, that they wanted boys, we got girls, but you're gonna have to work like a boy. And I'm like, what does that mean? Girls can do, I
We
came
can do it too.
with that, like we could do the same thing. And he's like, well, we have a farm. You have to pick up 100 potatoes every day at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'll be honest with you, Ray. I wasn't a morning person. 5 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock was good for me, like in Canada. So I was like, 5 o'clock. He's like, yeah, there's no negotiation. You're gonna work hard. So the 6 months that I stayed in Russia, I picked up every day, not Monday to Friday, Monday to Sunday,
100
100
potatoes.
potatoes, 50 that I we kept in the house, 50 we exchanged in the market. Rather, at the beginning, we thought it was funny between Canadians, and after we saw there was a system, everybody's helping each other, and that's where my community value, being involved in the community,
It came from
came.
there.
And we had this from there, and also they didn't get paid at that time. Every 3 months, they would get some kind of sum. So the community helped each other, just like in Haiti when they were like, oh, we used to, eat together. If we had a little, we would share. It was the same situation. And I saw the power of community. That really changed me. I realized you can't do nothing without your community, but you need to give
To
to
receive,
receive.
right?
Exactly. And my host family was they were givers. Like they would, if something would happen, the whole family would help the other family. And I was like, wow, I don't do that in Canada. I don't even know my neighbors. So I would know some of my neighbors, but it made me really reflect what kind of human I wanted to be, and stay there 6 months. Did journalism. Um, it was very difficult because they didn't have computers. So basically, the plan that we had to work on before going to Slavs, that's a little town that I lived in, didn't pan out. So what we created is getting them computers, getting Microsoft translated in Russian, getting to know, training them to know how to put a newspaper together, how to get some leads, spin the news. I didn't understand the language fully, but I was able to talk chut paruski enough to get my point across. And also, I was the only Black person. So I was very dependent on other Canadians for my security and also my host
Hmm.
family. And the fact that they protected me, I didn't experience racism. I experienced curiosity. People wanted to know, Black women have a different type of body than, other
Hmm.
communities. And they were very intrigued. And I live near the Baltic Sea,
Wow.
and I said I did synchronized
Hmm.
swimming, so I would go swimming every day, and they were like, her skin doesn't change color, it get darker, because I was in the summer. We left on July 4th, 1997, and we returned December 20th of the same year. So for me, it changed when I came back to Ottawa. I was
You're a changed
completely,
person.
I had a
Yeah.
culture shock. Yeah, I had a culture shock. I had a hard time going back to
Hmm.
university. I went to Ottawa U for one semester, and I didn't understand. I didn't connect with the Western world
Mm.
anymore, and that's when I decided to go and continue my studies in
It's
Montreal.
amazing what you learn from traveling, from experiencing other cultures. Would you say that should be part of a curriculum for everyone? you know,
It should be. I always say, if I have kids tomorrow, they will have to experience at least 6 months minimum to a year. My boyfriend has done it many times because of the career that he chose. But I think it puts in perspective that we're all blessed and we could do better and we could help each other because we don't get here alone. And because of my host family, remember the vision I
hmm
told you? So he kept on asking me, "What's your vision?" And I'm like, "I just know what I want to do when I grow up." But he's like, "Why is your this job gonna? What's the impact that's gonna have on other people? How it's gonna impact another job? Because you're at the service of others." And I'm like, I swear, I was 19 and I was like, "This is gibberish." But to be polite, I was like, "Okay, okay." Now, at one point, I got it. I think after 2 months, we've experienced something where families weren't eating, and I said, "Okay, I get it." So he's like, "So when are you gonna?" At the time, I wanted to be a journalist. He's like, "So what kind of journalist you're going to be. Are you going to be the one that wants the news, or the one that's going to help?
Hmm.
Do you want to say good news or want to say bad news? It was always, always, always challenging me. And at the same time, they made me learn the language faster because I was the only Black. They wanted me to be secure. So they gave me a lot of things in my toolbox that I didn't understand at the time, other than the language, to express myself, to understand when people are talking about me, so I could run, or I could, holler, or, and have a plan B. So, and also my parents were divorced at the time that I went to
Okay.
Russia. And for me, having a father figure that was very rigid, very ambitious. And it's weird because it's like he knew. He's like, okay, I know you're going to. He knew when I came back to Canada that I was going to put my plan in action because he instilled it in me. And also, he's like, those 100 potatoes, I saw the impact, the families that would say thank you, the family that was stronger, the exchange, and at the end of the 6 months, his company was growing. And now the Iknativa family is the biggest meat factory in
Wow.
Russia.
So he was able to speak it
Oh
into
yeah.
existence.
Yeah, not only speaking it, he died like almost 10 years ago, and his son took over. And because it's a mindset again, and because you're drilled what you're going to do about it, what's your vision? The vision cannot be for you. It has to be for other people. What are you going to do? What is your job going to bring to the table? Even though it doesn't come, like, I remember I said, I want more representation. That was one thing. And he's like, there's not a lot, like, you're Black and you're Canadian. How come there's not a lot of Canadians on television? He's like, well, that's your job, to be one of the first one and to open the doors for other
That's
people.
right.
Exactly. So for me, that was mind blowing, and I was 19. So when I came to Ottawa and everybody was talking about like either getting married, no disrespect, but it was different for me. I wanted to see how I could have an impact on the world, knowing that everything was closed, because I grew up in Ottawa, but I really wanted to work in French. So I moved to Montreal.
And how was that experience in Montreal?
Ooh, Montreal, that's when I was like, okay, I did journalism at UQAM. They bricked me. After I did 2.5 years, and after I said, I'm not going to work in television.
Really?
I was too dark, too tall, too curvy, too. And one of the teachers said to me, tu vas jamais réussir. You're never going to get it. You're super talented, but we're not ready for you. He was the only one that was honest enough. He's like, if I was you, I would work behind the scene until people are ready for you. And that's what I did. So I came back to Ottawa, started working for the YMCA as a PR in communication after I got a job. So what I would do, I would always negotiate to have my summer vacation to do television work, either researcher or TV host. So I worked for Les Productions Charbonneau, that was doing a lot of things with TVO. I was always one of their hosts for whatever program they had. And after I started working for production companies in Montreal, I started for a show called Oui, je le veux. It's basically a wedding show in French where we would follow. It was the beginning of unscripted shows. It was in 2004, and they heard about me. They're like, it seems like you're really good casting people, and we need somebody in Ontario that speaks English and French that could get the people, convince them to get married on television. And I'm like, I'm the girl. And that was my in to show diversity. And that's in 2004, because I knew ethnic weddings are the best. So what I would do, and that's a trick I learned from my host father. He's like, you show the first option is not so good. Second one is the good one. And after you finish with a pretty decent one, they're gonna hold on to the one in the middle. So basically I would always have 4 options, and there would be 1 or 2 ethnic groups, and they would always take the ethnic group. So that's how I got the wedding show in Quebec. That was that aired in Canal V. And I was the researcher for 4 out of the 6 seasons. That made a name
Mm-hmm.
for me. And because I work remotely, I was already working remotely. People didn't know I was Black. They're like, oh, Sabine Daniel, I'm Québécois.
So, this a
Until they
name that's
saw me.
you don't know.
So I work for the wedding show. I work for another wedding show, unscripted, that was for decoration in Montreal. After they worked, that company had another wedding show, I Do Let's Eat, that was all about ethnic weddings and what we eat in our weddings. And I worked for them, and that was in Toronto. So I really worked behind the scene while I was being a PR for the YMCA. And after the YMCA, I worked for the city of Gatineau for 8
Okay.
years. And I was not in my contract. It said I cannot be in television because they found me there, and they're like, no, but, it's going to be a conflict. But YouTube started for me in 2012, and television didn't mean social media. And for them, they're like, social media is going to disappear. It's all good. So I started this show called Au lit avec Sabine. And it's basically, I would have interviews just like we're doing, but in a bed, in a hotel room. And a person in Toronto saw it. That was 2012. That's a concept that I saw in Europe because my sister lived there with her boyfriend who is playing basketball overseas. And I decided to do the same thing in Canada. And that got me to have my own talk show, Suivez-Moi, that you see the poster in the back, with Belle. Because they saw me on YouTube. The guy's like, I don't understand a lick of French, but this girl needs a talk show. And I got to work with the team in Bell in Ottawa. And that's what really worked. But with Bell, what was really interesting, they're like, we want you to have a show around what you like. And you're going to be the co-producer. And I'm like, I don't know nothing about producing. He's like, we're going to teach you. And I loved it. That's when I realized, wow. And at that time I was working for the city. I had just switched. So because at the city of Gatineau, I couldn't be in television, I got an offer around that same time to come to work for the city of Ottawa. And they allowed me to be in front of the lens because there was no conflict. And I was like, okay, I'm taking that job. And during the summer of 2015, I got this opportunity to do like a 12 It was a 12 episode of Suivez-Moi. And for me, I came up with the concept, and they gave me a budget, and I'm like, why should I deal with the budget? They're like, you're the co-producer. He's like, if you want to win, you need to lead a team. And I'm like, okay, I'm all about leading a team. Like I did that at work, right? So I hired everybody that ever worked for me for free. My makeup artist, the person that did my hair. That was my way of saying thank you. I didn't take no salary. I said, I'm paying you guys. Because I've done Rogers. I've did a lot of volunteer work, and I always want to look fabulous. That's me. I just love that look. But at home, I'm pretty decent. I look like toned down. But it was a way to brand myself, and also to say everything that I touch needs to be excellent, from the way I look to the way I deliver. For me, it's really important because as a underrepresented person, we don't have many room for errors. And unfortunately, that's
a reality.
That's a curse. That's a reality. And also it's an opportunity of showing them that when we touch something, we do it so well that you have no choice to recognize the talent, and also that to give us our space to work with you guys. So basically when Suivez-Moi hit, a whole bunch of opportunities opened, and I won the year after in 2006 the Nelson Mandela Award from the family. So Gwen Madiba was the ambassador of the Nelson Mandela family in North America. She had that award show, and the Nelson Mandela's family came to Ottawa with Naomi Campbell and another prominent personality and I got the award, and that opened up a floodgate of
It's amazing.
opportunity. And that I wasn't ready for that because I was still working for the government. I like my job, but that's when I was like, maybe there's something
We're in the
else,
matrix,
you
as I
know?
call it, as I told you.
Yeah, exactly. So and and after, at one point, my job and what I was doing part time were, you know, your passion is taking
Hmm.
over, and it was causing a little friction
Okay.
at work. And my grandmother got sick, and I remember 6 months before she passed away, she said, "You have so much success." I was winning awards and, getting recognized, and at work it was causing friction. And she's like, "You're doing that part time. Imagine if you would do that full
Hmm.
time." I never thought about it because being in Ottawa, almost everybody works
Yeah.
for the government. And because, everything that happened in university, for me, it was like, okay, I could do that part time. It's a good side hustle. I get some money on the side, put it in the house for renovation. And when my grandmother passed away, I think for me, I had just turned 40. I went into a real crisis, and la crise de la quarantaine, and I had it. I realized, and I think the day we had our funeral, I would hear a lot of stories that you don't know about your parents or your grandparents. And from my grandmother, everybody would say in their own words, she didn't have a lot, but she always gave back, and she made amazing things happen. And she's like, look at it, all her grandkids, they all went to school. She all got her kids married, and everybody's doing well. And I realized my grandmother had a grade 3. She didn't go to school. She learned how to read in Canada at probably 70 or 75
Hmm.
years old. She went back to school. She was the life of the party in her family. And she was always in there. She's like, what are you gonna? She was like a little bit like my host father. She's like, you want the house? What are you
Yeah.
doing? Do you have the
What are you
down
gonna do
payment?
about it?
What kabla? Yeah, what are you gonna do about it? And she's like, and I love that, but I didn't realize, and I realized she was so poor. She didn't want her grandkids to be poor, and I didn't know how poor she was until 2018. I went to Haiti again, and I saw where she lived. I cried,
Hmm.
and it put me in context that you have one life to live. She used to say that you have one life to live, might as well try. She's like, you like that guy, go for it. Like she was no like, and we were very, how can I say? I think we realized when she passed away, she was a go getter. Like even though she didn't have enough, in her mindset, she said she has enough to try. And when she passed away, I literally, one day, May 6th, I walked in my job and I
That's it.
said, I'm done.
That's it. That takes a
Yeah.
lot of
I
courage.
sat down. I could say it was the hardest thing because, you're doing good money, and I didn't fully have a plan. I could say that. I fully didn't have a plan, but I knew I was just drowning. I no longer liked my job. I was questioning everything. And that vision, I had no vision. I was like, okay, I work for the
Hmm.
government. I don't necessarily, I don't know what's the impact. I couldn't measure it. For me, I need to measure it, you know? And was it reaching ethnic people? Would it touch linguistic diversity? Yes. But I didn't see the impact. And for me, that was I couldn't see my vision. And whenever people would say, like, oh, you're so lucky, hold on to that job for another 15 years and you'll have a good
That's the
pension. And I was
classic.
like, 15 years? And I swear, I was like, I'll die. No, I was physically getting
Hmm.
sick. And like, there was one day I parked my car. I The walk was like the walk of like, okay, stop. You're old enough. You know how to get a job. You went to school. You have a degree. You have one life to live. And what I forgot to tell you, Ray. When I moved when I changed jobs from Ottawa to no from Gatineau to Ottawa, I decided to put 30% of my salary aside to take a year off. Okay. So when I decided that, I forgot about it. And I had asked. because with my grandmother passing away, I've had my grandmother. My grandmother came to Canada to help my mother with me when I was born. So I've had her all my life. I didn't realize I had a whole year of salary put aside, and I had worked almost 6 years. So when I talked to my boss, she's like, "Oh, when I hire you, you had asked to have eventually a sabbatical for a year." And I forgot about it. She's
Amazing.
like, "Take
Yeah.
it, take it." And I took it, never went back. I literally called her. So basically, what happened is that my grandmother passed away in January 11th. In May 6th, I said, "I'm done." She's like, "Take a year off.
Just think about it.
You have a salary. Think about it." And I moved to Montreal. Within 8 months, I came with a game plan. That time, I
We're
was
prepared.
like, "This is how we're going to do it." I was prepared. I had a vision, and I rolled it out. And one of the things is like I didn't sell my house. I rented. I didn't want to lose my everything that I worked on, so I rented my house. I scaled down. I look at my budget. I scaled everything to half of what I had because I didn't have the same salary. I saved up enough, but you don't know what's gonna happen. And sure enough, at the end of the month of June, I had a proposition to go be the director of programming for a new TV station called
That's it to you.
Native TV, and I was their director of programming for a year. And after I left, because I wanted to experience to be in front of the camera, and I had a contact of a person that I met through Native, and we hit it off. And she had received an email saying they're looking for people who have the experience of running their show, be showrunners, producers, and Netflix is giving bursary to go back to school. So basically, they paid everything: your rent, your schooling, your car. You basically have to go back to school and become the best producer. And I applied, and I knew the school, and I'm like, "You're never gonna take me." It's one of the best school in Canada for filming and television. It's next to Lunis, to Lucam. I literally went to school and saying, I want to go to that school, but it was so expensive. I was like, I'm never going to get there. So I had that mental block and got accepted. And when I got accepted, I was like, I'm not going to go. I don't have enough experience. I didn't feel up to par. It was of all the things that the biggest challenge for me is to go through that school. It was so hard. But it made me who I am. I always say thank you to them because they basically mold you into a producer. Obviously a lot of things helped me to get to Linus, but everything I've learned in that school, because it's so hands-on, they're basically, you don't have no grades. They're basically do a film, do a TV show. And everything that I produce belongs to Netflix for the next 5 years. So basically up until 2024. And I finished on February 27, 2020, just before the pandemic. And I was so happy. I was like, I'm done. I don't need to do this anymore because it's really intense. If you're not 100% dedicated, it's not that you're not going to fail. You're not going to have the full benefit of what the school offers you. Because one of the things that I've learned in that school is that they put you in contact with people in the network that we don't have. So for me, it was a way to understand the Quebec system. Yeah, contacts, meet with stars and people. Like for me, I kept on saying, I want to be the Véronique Cloutier, who is the Oprah of Quebec. And the word got around. I got a job offer from her team eventually. And I worked a year and a half with her during the pandemic on her show Première Fois. And I would talk to her and she's one of my biggest supporters on social media, on Instagram. So when I finish, and timing is everything, right? But I finished Linus, pandemic, George Floyd. George Floyd, because I did the school, so everybody met that girl from Ottawa that speaks French and English and that wants to be in the business. My phone, I'm telling you, I know the pandemic wasn't fun for people. It was my busiest time. When people tell me I'm busy now, pandemic was worse. I'm
Wow.
telling you. I was working almost 24/7. I was doing the weather in English, in French, from my apartment in
Hmm.
Montreal. I would write, I would do research during the day. I never slept. I basically stacked up so much money. Honestly, I was able to buy a house. No, a second house on during
So
the pandemic.
pandemic
I am
was
not joking.
was good to you despite the.
You know what? It was. I'll tell you. Yes, it was good, but it was also disturbing because I realized how Quebec was closed. But when, and I always say that George Floyd didn't die in vain. Everybody that had worked before, prior, everybody that I knew in the business was working. Everybody. Like sometimes I would say no, but I know a guy called Ray, he could do
Mhm.
that for you. I would refer people and people actually called those people back. So we were all working. People from Ottawa, Toronto. My best friend is a actress. She's from Ottawa. Her name is Sajin Simajis. They're like, Sabine, do you act? I'm like, no, but I know a good actress. She trained in New York. So everybody was working and we didn't stop. Why? Because we started our craft before. And I always thank my grandmother because she died in 2018. So I had two years to develop contacts in Quebec, get into the system, go back to school in producing, get into that star system in Quebec that's very close. And the minute that George Floyd passed away and everything that
Change
surrounded,
everything.
it opened
Hmm.
up. It was basically, I realized you always gotta be ready and you always gotta do stuff because the day something's gonna happen, you better
Yeah.
be prepared. And I'm telling
Stay
you,
ready.
Radio Canada, stay ready. And it's weird to say. I dealt in my past. I was a big procrastinator. Lost many jobs because of that. And the pandemic, I learned how to, like, it was now. Everything was urgent. I would hire people to write for me. I was saying yes to everything. And I would learn from it. And because we didn't have to move, I would save time in driving. And that's how, like, so I worked for almost, I had like 10 clients. And I got my friends to work, the ones that know how to write, the ones that know how to write for television. So I would subcontract and make me look good. And after when they're like, how come your work so well? I hired Ray, I hired this, I hired, and they're like, oh, you're really a team player. You're really a producer because producing is that, is like to delegate and to find the right people to do your work. And that's how I worked for 2 years and burned out.
You
Almost
almost there.
burned
Oh,
out.
wow.
Almost burned out. Yeah,
Listen,
almost.
Sabine,
Almost.
I love the passion. Obviously, it's clear. When people see this conversation, they'll see that you love what you do. What
I
advice
do.
would you give a young person, a young black person who wants to get into production, the film industry, production industry? What would you tell that person?
You know what? You mentioned that question, and I had to think about it because now the time is now, not tomorrow. Now there is so many opportunities right now that I find if you don't up my if you don't try, you will lose. So basically, the first thing I would say, expand your network. Go where Black people are
Hmm.
underrepresented and show your passion. Show that you're willing to work and learn. People are more open than ever. Volunteer, travel. Now we're not in a pandemic. Get out of your way. Canada is a small country when it comes to television. Like, I'm developing with Nigeria. I'm developing with Australia. Things for the Black
Hmm.
community. And another thing is learn another language, Spanish, um, Chinese, Japanese. I think diversity is not going to be a black and white thing. It's going to be an intersectional thing. What, like, being, for me, my intersectionality is being Black, Canadian, Franco-Ontarian, Quebecer, from Caribbean origin. So we could play in all those aspects. And the more we're diverse and the more we're curious, be curious. If you're not curious, you're not going to land the dream job that you want. Right now, the number one skill is to be curious and to learn from everything you're doing. I will hire somebody that doesn't have the knowledge, that didn't go to school, but is curious enough that, oh, I did YouTube. I learned from YouTube. I took some classes, because I've noticed a lot of people are self-taught in that generation because of YouTube. So they know a little bit more because they're so curious, they go further. Like, I just hired an editor that's a gamer. And when he does the way his rhythm to story tell, it's like a game. So it's super fun for kids. And he brings my show to another level. So people always want to find exciting way to tell a story in their business. And if you explore who you are at the core, it's gonna open doors. Because right now I could tell you, like, being Black anywhere in the world is hot, but being able to tell those stories authentically and with your voice and knowing who you are, I think it's that too. And being curious, it's gonna open doors for
That's
sure.
amazing. Listen, there you have it. You learned today, you lead tomorrow. That's how I like to end things. Sabine, I thank you very much for your time. Like I said, I know you're very busy, but you took time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.